Welcome to Better Mental Health, a podcast for men looking to build a resource and community around destigmatizing mental health. I'm Blake.
I'm Blair.
And I'm Jamie. And today we're diving into a topic that a lot of men struggle with, but don't always feel safe to talk about: anger. We're going to unpack our own stories of expressing anger, the role it's played in our lives, and our own journeys of healthy emotional expression. Before we jumped on the call, Blake said that he had a little something that was making him stir up with some anger. So Blake, you want to dive in and talk about it?
Yeah, we're talking about anger today, and there's a negative connotation with anger a lot of times, but it can also be a good thing too, and it can inspire you to take notice of things, take action on things. And just something that got me fired up recently was Andrew Tate has popped up a couple of times in just different discussions, and a show we were watching on Netflix talked about him as well briefly. So I got curious, and I hadn't heard about him in a while, so I was like, what is this guy up to? And of course, he's back in the United States, unfortunately. And I was just Googling around a little bit, and I happened to come across a podcast that was done a few weeks ago with him as the guest. And this podcast got over 3 million views. And I just, first of all, I got angry because I don't understand why we're platforming somebody like this. Somebody who's a self-proclaimed misogynist, racist, and has just said all kinds of horrible things. And
he's actually also been proven to be guilty of rape and sexual assault, right? Sex trafficking, that's what it was, in a different country,
Romania.
Yeah.
So why we're idolizing somebody like this was just like getting me angry. And I was looking at the comments on this very infuriating. So I was looking through the comments as I was just listening to a little bit of this podcast, and all the comments were like all positive towards Andrew Tate. Oh, this guy speaks only in facts, and he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's talking about. I followed this guy's advice, and I was just getting angrier and angrier because, again, I don't understand why anyone would platform somebody as horrible as this, and why people would take the advice from somebody like this. Because I think the three of us are examples of people who probably live lives that are pretty much directly opposed to Andrew Tate's lifestyle and advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the three of us have lived fulfilling lives, happy lives, and you don't have to take the path that Andrew Tate lays out, which is just filled with misogyny and hatred and all kinds of negative things. So
yeah,
I was getting a little fired up about that.
Yeah.
Thought it might be something we're talking about on our episode on anger.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The thing that came to mind first for me was like righteous anger. I mean, feel like we could probably get into that a little bit, but I think you had something to tie in, Jamie, with the Andrew Tate discussion.
Well, yeah, I think what you're saying is exactly what I was going to get into, which is there's a world where our anger can drive us to make change in the world. And so like when you're angry about something that is so obviously bad and should be changed in the world, it helps us make informed decisions. And so for me, I think it's been helpful to tap into what am I angry about and why am I angry about it, in order to then make some educated decisions rather than try and push it down. Because if you let it come out, then it's like, okay, so what can we do about Andrew Tate? And it's not like let's go fight this guy, but it's like, what can I do in my community that is in direct opposition to Andrew Tate? So I think it's like a worthwhile emotion to tap into if it's done in a healthy way.
And that was kind of why, a little bit why we started this podcast, right?
Yeah.
It was just to have a different voice out there than some of these more toxic masculinity, manosphere voices that are taking hold right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think anger can be used as a positive influence, and if it gets you motivated to, I like that term, righteous anger, to get you to take action on something. So,
yeah. The other thing about Andrew Tate that I was thinking about, actually the reason he came up in my head last night was I was having one of my classes, and the class was focused on narcissistic personality disorder. And I was like, who can I think of? The first one that came to mind was Donald Trump. The second one that came to mind was Andrew Tate.
But how these guys get massive followings is so confusing to me. But I think it's because they I listened to part of this podcast that Andrew Tate was on. I couldn't listen to the whole thing; it's too painful.
Mm-hmm.
But he does speak quickly. He speaks confidently, and just from an optics standpoint, that makes it seem like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think someone listening to that and they just say, "Wow, this guy seems like he's very clear in his messaging. He's speaking confidently. It must be working."
Yeah.
And
He's also
again, from
like
an optics standpoint,
physically
Mhm.
fit. He's got a strong opinion too. Like he's not willing
Yeah.
to back down from that strong opinion.
Yeah. Well, the only other thing I'll say is that the other thing that made me angry is he gives us bald guys a bad look. Right? So
He doesn't
so
represent you,
anyway,
Blake.
I know. Yeah.
Well, the thing that's coming to mind now is I feel like we're living in a time, maybe post 2015, 2016, of like just saying the worst thing that you can nationally to get
Yeah.
attention. It doesn't matter what it is. Like it's the
Mhm.
purpose isn't to be right, isn't to be a good person. It's to be like, I'm just gonna say the most outlandish shit so that people will pay attention to me. Like you said, you watched a good portion of the episode or whatever of his, Blake. I mean, just
Maybe 10 minutes of it. Yeah.
yeah, but like we're tuning in because we're like, how can this be like this person be platformed? And it's like because they're saying the worst shit possible, and then people are curious about like how could people actually believe that, and then it just becomes this like it's a conversation to have a conversation about the thing that we all like are hating, and it's like
You're
or
right.
you know,
Yeah.
and some people are attracted to that actual the things that they're saying. So it's like it's so frustrating to see such vitriol be like yeah exemplified or just like amplified, but that's just how the world is
Yeah.
now. It's like
Yeah.
algorithms are just like what's the most clicky and attention getting, and like that's ruined the general discourse of
Interesting.
like actual good
Yeah. It's the
conversation.
controversy.
Yeah,
The most controversial stuff is what gets the most attention, the most clicks, the most views, and people who are willing to grift or just do whatever in order to get famous or get attention, they have no problem saying controversial stuff just to
yeah.
get that attention.
I
So
mean,
I
and
think
that's
you're right.
also like
Yeah.
what Google and YouTube and Spotify, like that's they want that because that gets them clicks, that gets them money, and it's like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we're legitimately at peak capitalism at this point with so many different things in the world. But
Yeah.
we yeah, now I'm starting
Mhm.
to get angry.
Well,
It's perfect.
one study we'll have to do is cut this little clip out and put little Andrew Tate's picture on it and see if it gets more views as like clickbait. It'd be interesting to see
Mhm.
if what we're talking
Yeah,
about is actually proven to be true. But the other thing I'm thinking about is what is it about Andrew Tate? We talked about it maybe a little bit, but like where is it that men are attracted to Andrew Tate, and what is it that we could be doing or learning from Andrew Tate in terms of getting attention?
Yeah, there's nothing good that we can learn from it. But no, I think I know what you're asking, Jamie. It's what is the thing behind him that's drawing people to
Right.
him?
You're right.
I think some of it is maybe people looking for like a father figure,
Mm-hmm.
and he's maybe somebody who fills in the place of that, giving like advice to young men and then showing evidence. And in his case, it seems like very superficial stuff like women and like yachts and
Mm-hmm.
look, live this lifestyle and you'll get these things. So for anyone who's lost and without direction, he's providing that direction. And I think to your point, Jamie, because he has strong opinions on things, that just makes him seem like he's like the some kind of authority figure.
Yeah.
And so for those without an authority figure, he fills in that gap for them. And then some of the advice, I think people get lured in. They wouldn't necessarily fall into the manosphere type thinking initially, but they are lured in just by the basic advice. Oh, take care of your body, work out, get in shape, stuff that's like basic advice. But then the gaps are filled in with this like misogynistic stuff and other bad advice that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that you're more susceptible to because you're now in it.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. I did watch an interview with him a while back where he there was a therapist that like got him on a podcast episode and tried to like dig into his past. It was really interesting to watch. And it's very clear that there's a lot of like daddy issues for Andrew Tate. I think that he,
Surprising.
yeah, as a lot of what is probably going on with people with issues, it's probably abusive fathers or some type of trauma in their life that forced them to have to be that way. And I think that if we just got people into, I bet if Andrew Tate and Donald Trump, if we got them into therapy, enough therapy, we might be able to. Yeah, you don't think so, Blair?
No, no, too, like, I don't know about too far gone. I don't think anybody's necessarily too far
Right.
gone, but I don't think that it has to be, people are going to be willing to change on their own. We can't force someone to just by sitting and
Yeah,
talking.
I don't mean that there's a possibility of Andrew Tate and Donald Trump changing. I just mean that if there was, maybe let's pretend the right circumstances existed where they got into consistent therapy, I wonder if the possibility exists that they could be changed or they could come out the other side
Yeah.
less. I don't know. It's the optimistic
so-
part of me that never goes away.
Yeah. That's a good thing. If it never goes away,
So-
I've lost that.
Yeah, so it's more of a hypothetical is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Jamie. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, because I was like, there's no way those guys would go through like sessions of therapy at
Yeah.
this point in their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to maybe bring it back to us and our experiences of anger.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you typically do with anger, I guess, when you're feeling it? Blake, I know you have a story that I love. I don't know how willing you are to share it. but-
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, but this is probably a good step into just like where anger can manifest in when it's most unhealthy, where it comes out in bursts because it has been kept under the surface for a little while. Yeah, a few years ago, I had a pretty humbling experience where I was upset about a few things. I think I had some stress at work and just some other things going on. To be honest, a lot of the details are missing now. Yeah, or there's yeah. But I was suppressing everything basically for a while. Could feel it bubbling under the surface, but one night I think I was just like didn't have anything else going on, and I think I had been probably drinking a little bit, and I was playing video games, and I was getting more and more frustrated because I was playing League of Legends. If anyone's played League of Legends, you probably can relate to this experience.
Yes.
I just kept on dying over and over, and I just at the point where the game where there can be a point in the game where you get so far behind that you just can't come back. Your brain is telling you that you still need to try, and like if you do something right, you'll be able to come back, but then something unlucky would happen and you die again. And the anger just bubbled over, and the computer, my desk was right next to her guest bed. And so I just stood up from my chair and I just slammed my fist down on the bed. And I was like, that felt pretty good. So I kept on doing it. And I just kept on like punching the bed like as hard as I could.
Yeah.
And then once I got it all out, I like stood up and turned around, and my wife is looking at me with a horrified look on her face. What are you doing? And I was like, wow, that's embarrassing. So then trying to explain, well, I was dying a lot in a video game, so
Yeah.
That's the best part. I love that story.
I want to know how she responded after
yeah,
that.
she was just like, I think she was almost like scared, like
Oh, interesting.
what is happening? Like she'd never seen me behave like that before. To just walk in on it, like to seemingly out of the blue, this angry outburst, and just she probably had no idea what caused it. So it was like a little awkward for a bit, and we talked through it, and I was like, just been holding a lot of stuff in, and this was just like the final straw,
Yeah.
I was trying to just like decompress, playing like video games, get my mind off things, and it only made things worse. So I just got to that breaking point, and I think she understood it, but it was still like not the most fun thing to walk in on seeing me do that.
For sure. There are a few things that are coming to mind that I feel like are related. So first of all, I feel like video games themselves, for me, I'll just speak to my own experience in video games. I feel like that's probably the most angry I've ever been able to be is like at video games
Yeah.
or
Interesting.
something competitive for sure. But yeah, then the other thing that came to mind when you were talking was anger being scary. I feel like that's my experience with anger, is like it is scary when it does bubble up for a long time and then I finally express it. It usually is a scary expression of an emotion. And so it's like
Scary to you, like scary, or scary
it's
to someone else.
both. I feel like it's like, first
Mm.
of all, I feel like if I get witnessed in it, like Blake was, then I feel like, yeah, it can scare someone else. And then depending on, the level of anger that I feel, I can feel scared for myself. There have been times where I've gotten so angry and like tensed all my muscles and, or punched something and I've seen like dots. I don't know if you guys have ever like,
Yeah,
seen that.
yeah,
So
Mm-hmm.
that scares me.
Yeah.
Like
totally.
that can't be good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just curious about like your guys' experience with, scaring others in your anger.
Yeah, been there.
Jamie, you got
Yeah,
a face.
I feel like I've got a few stories like Blake's, but not necessarily tied to video games, but actually just tied to disagreements with my wife. And I think that we've had a very interesting road to the way that we handle arguments in our marriage. And now it's getting towards a healthy place, but it's taken a long time to get there. And a lot of that was things would spiral up and I wouldn't know how to handle it. And then I'd hit my breaking point, and then it became scary for Lauren and scary for me. And it was more about what I'd do with that anger. I would want to punch a wall. I'd want to punch a stool. I'd want to punch something. And it was like, I just had no place to let this anger out. And I want to slam a door. It's something that's been a theme in my life, is like how to handle those breaking moments. I have some ways of navigating that now, but there are still moments where I'm like, it just comes up and I just need to slam a door and it just feels so good. And in those moments, I care so little about what happens to it's always with a physical object.
Oh,
Like I care so little about breaking that object. And it could be something really expensive. And it's like, my phone. I've thrown my phone like
oh.
across my car at one point, or like slamming a door, punching a wall. I punched a hole in a wall. And so I then had
Yep.
to embarrassingly go back and fill that hole and figure that out. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Sorry, not to laugh, Jamie, but I'm just picturing you like after you like punch the hole in the wall, then like pulling your phone up, be like, how to patch the hole in the wall.
Yeah, it was a couple days later, but yeah,
That's too
that's
funny.
exactly right. I now have that skill.
There, see, it did result in something positive. No, I was gonna ask, I mean, do you think is that one way to work through anger, is just like knowing, okay, sometimes I do get to a breaking point, and if I do get to that point, I need to maybe I do have a door to slam or something outside the backyard that I know I can just break.
Hmm.
Or do we need to try to find ways to manage the anger before it gets to that point?
I think
But
the both is the answer. I think that, like, I've talked to my therapist about this, and we talked about solutions, and one of them was like, get a punching bag, like for real, get a punching bag and hang it somewhere where I can access it in these moments. Because I don't know that the anger is accessible to me outside of these moments, and I've tried to get there in therapy sessions. I've worked to like experience a moment, and sort of you can get there, but it's definitely not the same as those explosive moments. And so to have something accessible that feels safer, and where I can like go in the backyard and let off some steam or something, that would be a better way to handle it than to damage my house or like
Yeah.
break my cell phone. But I do think that learning how to recognize when you have smaller moments of anger and to communicate or express that anger in those smaller moments then alleviates the pressure of the bigger moments. So
mm-hmm.
that's, I think, the other lesson is starting to recognize when those smaller moments are coming up. And it's hard to do because you have to be more in touch with your emotional state on a regular basis. And so how do you do that? I think in therapy, learning to be more aware of your emotions, meditation. I also think that like physical activity, like sports and exercise, is another good outlet for that type of thing. Still have moments.
Yeah, well, of course. The other side of that, I'm trying to figure out how to discuss is like, not only are there going to be moments of like small bouts of anger, but also anger being the kind of the only emotion that it feels like men are allowed, quote unquote, to express
Right.
in their whole lives. So it may not even be, the buildup that we all are talking about, like where you're getting angry and it's building to something where it might be something like, I'm sad. But then like that can still be a build of like an emotion, and then sadness can come out in anger in different ways, not just
Yep.
sadness, all the different emotions.
Yeah. I have an example of that. Yeah. Just the other day, there was a moment where, I mean, and this happens in parenting, but it's a moment where Lauren and I were both at our wits' end, and we were just like, just trying to get by. And I came in and I was rushing Avit to get out the door for something. And as I was rushing Avit got really sad and started crying. I didn't realize that someone was on the phone with Lauren on speaker, and the way I was like talking to Avit was not cool, and the way that I was like communicating in general was not cool. And like, so there was someone on speakerphone, and I was super embarrassed, and I recognized that later. But in that embarrassment, I got super angry, and I was mad at Lauren for not telling me that somebody was on the phone. And I was mad at myself for communicating the way I did to Avit. And I was just like, in general, seething, and just had this whole impatient, angry moment. But it was really all came down to embarrassment.
Mm.
And I don't know quite how to experience embarrassment other than to just acknowledge it or sit with the embarrassment. But to sit with that is so uncomfortable, it made me angry.
Yeah, there are so many,
Mm.
there are two different things that
Yeah.
are coming to mind there. I'm like, the danger of only having anger as the emotional expression that we are allowed to have makes it so that when you are embarrassed, humiliated, shame, guilty, like
Mm-hmm.
everything
Mm-hmm.
comes out as anger. So that's just so dangerous in society, because I feel like there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be so many opportunities where you're feeling humiliated, and you, instead of just sitting in that, and which can be difficult, you're going to go for expressing it in some way, and it
Yeah.
can be really
Yeah.
dangerous. I don't know if you guys are on Reddit, but like nice guys or nice guy subreddit, where like basically it's a guy who's been
Yeah.
friendly to a woman or a friend or something for a long time, and then asks her out, and then they're like, oh no, I just want to stay friends, and they turn on him immediately, and they're like, well,
Yeah.
fuck you, you're ugly, like whatever the case may be. But it's like it's immediately
Mm-hmm.
switch, and it's like because they're feeling this like rejection, and rejection just
Mm-hmm.
immediately becomes something to be angry at the person who rejected you, versus like, okay, it's just, that's not the person that I'm gonna have a
Yeah.
sexual relationship with, or whatever
Yeah.
the case may be. But the other thing, you can keep going on that, but the other thing that's coming to mind, and it has been a factor in whether or not I've thought about having kids, is like my ability to handle my frustration and anger. I have
Mm-hmm.
I guess I always say I have a dog now, but I basically have like a step dog. He's crazy, and like I love him when he's nice and inside, he's nice, but like when he gets outside, he's around other dogs and kids, he's like can be kind of aggressive or just like playful and wants to, and I just the amount of frustration that I feel, or the anger that I feel when he's not doing what I want him to do, it's like I can't
Mm-hmm.
imagine that for a child. Jamie, there have been moments where I've been out with you in public, and I've seen your child do things that I'm like, I would be seething. I would be like, I have to go, guys. I can't keep hanging out. But
Yeah.
you handle it. So like, yeah, even with your story, I'm like, I don't know how it got to the level that it
Right.
did, but I'm always impressed by the way you handle frustration. But there's a lot of stuff in there.
That makes sense. And I think that there are a lot of people who are ill-equipped to be parents, and it's the reason trauma gets passed down. Like, it's just like we have our fathers who have expressed anger in the ways that your self-awareness of like fearing expressing anger in that way. To me, it's like you have an opportunity to, if you end up wanting to have kids at some point, before having kids, you can start addressing that in therapy and start trying to figure out and navigate with your dog as a practice how to channel that. But I think that for me as a parent, I'm acutely aware of what you're talking about. And in that moment, it's really important. This gets into parenting, but I'm just going to go there. I don't think you can control moments where the anger just outbursts necessarily, but then afterwards to repair,
Mm,
to apologize to your child and be like, that was not a good way to handle that. Like, I'm sorry I did that. I was embarrassed, and that was something that came out in my embarrassment. It's okay to say those things to your child and to admit failure. And I think that's the part that people get wrong the most is when they're having these outbursts, to not acknowledge them and be self-aware and apologize. And so
That sounds like it could be also with relationships too.
yeah,
Just repair
any
in
relationship.
general.
Yeah, of course.
Like, oh,
Right.
recognizing
Yeah.
that you did something that was, not what you should have been doing or not what you should have done, and
Yeah.
reconciling.
Mm-hmm.
But you really hit that like on the head, Blair. I feel like embarrassment is one of those emotions that so easily translates to anger. I've seen those posts like you were talking about on the Nice Guys subreddit, where it's like a friendly back and forth conversation between a guy and a girl, and then he tries to move things like a step further, and she's like, no thank you, and then all of a sudden it's like this anger just out of nowhere. And I think it probably starts with that embarrassment of rejection, and then translates to anger, and in that moment not caring what the outcome is, just needing to get that like anger out, which is super unhealthy. I know I've had like small moments of embarrassment that I can think of that have translated into anger, just like silly stuff. Steph will like mention, like, oh, we'll be like out somewhere, and she'll be like, oh, you looks like you missed a spot when you were like shaving your head. I've got like a hair like sticking out the top of my head, and I'll be like embarrassed about it because I'm like, oh my God, I've been walking around like this. And I can feel like some anger there. And she'll even like sense that. And she'll be like, are you like angry at me for pointing that out? Do you not want me to tell you? I'm like, no, I want you to tell me. But I'm just embarrassed about it. So now I'm angry at myself for like missing that and being like, it's like a weird thing, but that's just what triggered
What's coming to mind
in my mind when you mentioned that.
When you're saying that now, I'm like going back to the Andrew Tate thing with the Nice Guys. It's like what I'm thinking is like he allows men to get in touch with that nice guy energy of that way of expressing anger, especially towards women, where it's like, oh, you rejected me? Well, like fuck off then. I didn't want you anyways.
Yeah, you're right. I think he opens the door for that type of behavior to be like normalized, and in fact maybe even promotes it. I was like, okay, they're beneath your worth or whatever like manosphere phrases that they use, and just allows that to be permissible.
I want to get into what you started to describe, Jamie, of like the cycle or intergenerational trauma and passing things on.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, I'm noticing every time I say I'm curious now, I feel like I say that all the time. I hate it, but it's true. I lead with curiosity.
We all say it a lot.
But
okay.
I do want to know how you all experienced anger from the men in your life, fathers, others, and how it affected your expression.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I saw growing up was my dad worked a corporate job, and it was very clear and very evident growing up that my dad was stressed out by work and was high strung around it. And he worked from 8 in the morning until sometimes 8 at night. He'd get home from work, eat dinner, and go to his computer and keep working. And there was just a lot of stuff that he was doing, and he really took on that role as the provider. And I think that was something that he fell into. And then when things would go wrong in the house, he really needed order. He really needed things to be on time. He just needed structure. He's that type of person. And so having 2 kids and having his wife was not always the cleanest person. And so there'd be shoes all over the mudroom where we came into the house. And anytime he'd come in the house and like things were like really messy and he was stressed out from work, he would just be like, all of a sudden, like you'd see his jaw like come out, and it's like his angry jaw. And he'd just start like yelling about shit that didn't matter. It was just like, the shoes are fucking everywhere, and just had this outburst tantrum. And so I witnessed that all the time. And I can be that way now as an adult, and it pisses me off so much when I do that. I hate it more than anything when I just get irrationally angry about something, but it happens and it makes me more angry.
The cycle.
But
I was curious, what came up for me when you were talking. I'm not even curious about something.
Are you getting angry that you say that so much?
Making me angry. No, you're right. Oh my God. Okay, what I was gonna say was the sign that your dad was super angry I like immediately was thrown into, my own experiences in my childhood. So many. My dad was a general contractor. So, I would go on job sites. That's a whole different thing, like seeing him on a job site versus like at home.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just like the smallest things can set you off, very easily. But yeah, the thing that my dad did, he would always like be scratching his head. Like as soon as you saw him like scratching his head like that, you're like, "Ooh,
Hmm.
no, something's going on." So
Hmm.
your dad had the jaw thing,
Uh-huh.
Jamie. It's funny.
I
His
don't
tell.
think my dad had. I can literally only think of one time that I can remember my
Oh my
dad being
God, what?
angry. Because
Whoa.
my dad's a lot like me. Yeah, I know it's crazy. My dad's a lot like me. He's a nine as well. So I know that anger must be there under the surface. And he had a lot of stressful stuff going on because he owned his own business. And I know there's a couple periods of time where like things were not good. And there was one instance where like an accountant made a big mistake and like they thought they had more money than they did. And they gave out bonuses. And then they realized they really didn't have the money to do that. And things got scary for a while. So I imagine it must have been insanely stressful. But I think my parents, similar to both of yours, they carried the very traditional like my dad was the provider and my mom handled the kids and she helped with the business as well, but would be more the disciplinarian as well, I guess. But so I do remember that when my dad was angry, it was really scary because,
Yeah,
dad
yeah,
was
yeah.
never
I
angry.
think that's
Mm.
So if he was, he really,
I think that's such
really
a
messed
a
up.
better way of moving through childhood as a kid, where it's like you have a like, all right, so something is happening versus like, and and being able to recognize that and like, all right, dad's angry. He's never usually angry, so like something must be happening or going on. Versus like, I'll just speak to my own experience where it's like
Hmm.
anger was just all the time, everywhere. Like I remember this was like on a family vacation and we were at my family's cabin in Wisconsin, and my dad and his brother. I don't remember what the blow up was because I was a little too young to remember, but it was like basically, and I wish I was joking, but it was like over like potato chips or chips, like which ones to go get, and like someone had rammed out of the door and like slammed the door and like drove off really fast in the minivan through the meadow or something. It was just
Mm.
such a random thing, but that one always stuck in my head.
It's always the smallest things that cause
Yeah,
the
I,
biggest
I was gonna say
blow-ups.
that the
Yeah.
the I read somewhere that said like the size of the person, you can always measure the size of the person by the size of the things that make them angry or something like that. I hated that
Mm.
when I read it because I was like, I don't get.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel
well,
called
first
out.
of all, I don't feel like
So yeah, take
because
that very personally.
I'm like, I don't feel like I get angry at like huge things, like big things. Like I've had partners who have cheated on me in the past and things like that, but it's like that I can be like, all right, well, there must have been a reason. Not necessarily that, not necessarily that, like, quiet on the expression of emotions, but
Sure,
I'll
sure.
like drop a cord or something after I like wanted to plug it in and it like went down behind the desk or couch or something, and I just scream. I'm just like, God damn it. It's
Yeah.
not usually that, but yeah. So like that quote like made me
Yeah, I was
frustrated.
gonna say because you had another experience where you got literally hit by a car, and you were like super chill
Yeah.
about
I
that
told you guys about
situation.
that on
Yeah.
our other
Um,
call.
even though the driver, yeah, even though the driver was completely at fault and
Yeah.
should have seen you, you're just totally calm about that. But then, yeah, it's funny
Ugh,
the little things, those little frustrations, just like get under the skin. And I don't know why
Yeah.
that is, but I'm
yeah.
the same way
That's
too.
very true. It's weird.
Blair, have you spent some time ever exploring what that's about or
Oh,
what the threat
trying.
is in terms of
Yeah.
you're trying
Actively in
actively?
therapy, like
Yeah.
like emotions, anger is the emotion that I'm so in touch with. This is also, it's coming from my transpersonal psychotherapy class where we're talking about the Enneagram. One
Oh yeah.
ones, nines, and eights. Anger is like the most accessible
Mm-hmm.
emotion for them, which I found
Mm-hmm.
applicable and interesting.
Hmm.
But yeah, I am trying to
Yep.
explore that, and I think it's going to be a long road. Something that did come up in therapy that was interesting. I played football for 10 years, or and then rugby for like a couple seasons, or maybe only one. when I mentioned that to my therapist, he was like, "Oh, that must have been like a really good way of getting like anger out." And I was like, I think so, because I've talked about it before and with people, but like the thing that I loved about football, I hated when I like got the football in my hand. I'd like figure out where to go. I liked reading the defense and like finding where the ball was and hitting that person. It made me feel so good when I like made a play like
Yeah.
that. Jamie, in at camp, I remember a very specific.
Yeah.
We played this game. It was a water polo, but it was like a version where it was like in shin high, knee high water, and we'd be like tossing the ball around and like we could tackle,
Mm-hmm.
which made it amazing because like you'd tackle into like knee high water
So
and
fun.
shallow water, and it was
Shallow
like
water.
no,
Yeah.
no,
Didn't hurt when you got
yeah.
tackled.
And so,
Yeah.
but I do remember like one tackle where like I made perfect contact and like lifted him up and like put him like right down in the water. I got up. I was just like, I felt so good. Yeah. And
Superhero moment.
I remember like some
Yeah.
counselor was like, help him up, Blair, help him up. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah. But I was like, it just felt
Yeah.
so good.
Just celebrating on his corpse.
But I think that I'm curious about your guys' expressions of anger that have felt good like that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Blair, you mentioning summer camp, I think that's some of my best memories of like good outlets for anger. Because we played so many tackle games, and it was like we'd play capture the flag in the woods. We would play something called Foxes and Hounds, where you try and get into this end zone in the woods, but you were wearing camo, so you could like sneak up. But all these things were tackle sports. It was just such a good way to let out some of that energy. And just, I think at camp, there were a lot of things that weren't great about it. And we could get into that in another episode. But the one thing that I really loved about it more than anything was that type of thing where you just were getting your energy out as a kid and I think as like a boy or male, just like having that space to go do that type of shit. I miss that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I think that's why I want to be doing more sports and things, is to just get that outlet, but
I
don't
have
have time very much
yeah.
as a
Yeah, I have a
father
friend
to do it.
who I think he works at Google, and he was like, yeah, every Friday my buddies and I get together and we go boxing. Like we spar every Friday night. I was like, that's
Nice.
amazing. Can I join you?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that sounds great. But I've had enough head trauma though.
Yeah, you guys are reminding me of two stories that might be relevant. So one, I remember that we used to do beef at college, where we all went to college. So this is the most
You're gonna bring up our beef, Blake?
Yeah. Yeah. So we went to a very small college. The three of us and some other friends, we were all in a dorm together. We were all in the same house on campus. And we would have, I think it was weekly house meetings, or every other week, weekly house meetings, where it would just be like updates as to what's going on, activities we were doing in the next couple of weeks, things like that. But at the end of the meeting, there would always be, it was called beef. It was where somebody could like call somebody else out in the house that they had an issue with that week. Maybe they did something that annoyed them, like they played music too loud at 2 a.m. or whatever. And so they could call that person out. And then we had this giant wrestling mat in the basement. Everyone would just circle around
Yeah,
and
Ringworm
watch.
City.
Yeah, it's so gross. And watch these two people just duke it out, wrestle it out, and like get out the aggression. It was mostly done in fun, but I did call out Jamie one time, and I don't even remember what it
What
was.
for?
I think I made it up because I just wanted to wrestle you.
Well, and I think other people wanted us to wrestle because
I
we
think
were
that's what
like
it was,
similar size.
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
was
yeah. And neither of us knew what we were doing because neither of us had wrestled before. So I just remember like finally like you like fell down at one point or whatever, and I remember the rules where you're supposed to get their shoulders to touch the ground. So I just like grabbed your shoulders and I was just like pushing you down.
Yeah, I remember being on the ground
Yeah.
and just watching you
Like-
with all the
dude,
like
stop,
rage in your
yeah.
eyes, like pushing me down.
I'm like, okay, man, you win.
You had tapped into some real,
I guess I did.
real
Yeah,
deep dark spot.
but the
I
the
forgot
other,
about beef.
yeah,
So Blake won. You're the superior male.
the alpha. The other experience was probably the angriest I've ever been. And this was when I was training for cross country over the summer. So this was like 15 years ago and like 50 pounds ago. So I was running on the like road behind my parents' house, which is like a mountain road. There was a car coming up behind me, coming slowly because we were kind of going through this pass. So I was getting over to the side of the road as far as I could to give them space to go by. And as the car goes by, the kid in the passenger seat, I don't know, he's probably like 14, 15-year-old kid, rolls the window down. The car is very close to me. So he's very close to me and he just spits in my face for no reason. And then they just like speed off and just
Gross.
like,
God.
after like a couple seconds of just being like, what just happened? And like wiping it off my face, just disgusting. Anger just like immediately bubbled up and it was just like uncontrollable. There was nothing I could do. So all I could do is just like, I had so much adrenaline and like anger in my system that I just like sprinted as fast as I could, basically all the way back to my house. It was actually probably good that I was like in running mode at that time where I could just like burn off that adrenaline, run myself to like pure exhaustion just because I was so
Mm-hmm.
angry and just like fueled by adrenaline. And yeah, that was probably the angriest I've ever been. But that experience kind of reminded me that sometimes you do need a healthy outlet like that, like exercise, punching bag, like whatever it is,
Yes.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
just to burn it out of out of your system is sometimes the healthy thing to do if you can
Yeah.
have a healthy way to do it. I mean, something
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
where you're just like getting that anger, that aggression out in some kind of way like that.
Totally. Yeah. I remember a fight I had with Lawrence taking a drive and like I was seething and then just going on a hike and like, but like a fast paced hike. And that was one of the better ways of getting it out was
Mhm.
just like, you just need to like move
Yeah.
and get it out in that way.
The energy that like is in your body is just flowing so much, and I can't
Yeah.
like, you just, it needs an outlet. So it's like I think running or any of the things that you mentioned might be a good thing. What I was gonna comment on was I like started to think about that person's motivation, that guy's motivation for like just randomly spitting on a stranger. And
Right.
I feel like it ties into the anger thing a lot. Like I don't know this person's motivations, obviously, but my guess, it's like a form of control. Like I'm going to control that person's anger. Like, and if I spit on them, they're going to get pissed. And I was able to make them feel that way as I drive off.
Hmm.
Like, so I'm just like, maybe that's another thing coming back to Andrew Tate, where it's like, he's controlling people by making them angry at what he's saying. And it's like, so it's like this weird
Mm-hmm.
way of controlling people in a way that just feels
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, it makes me angry. I feel myself like shaking for you, Blake. Like how can, what is the thought process on like, I got
Yeah.
an idea. I'm gonna spit in this
Yeah.
guy's face who's just running on the side of the road.
Yeah. But I think you might have tapped into something there, Blair, because like this whole idea of just like triggering somebody else is the joke for people. It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
look at how upset you just got over this thing I did that was very upsetting. Why are you reacting like that? Why are you so upset? They get some kind of pleasure out of that, and maybe it is a control thing. I don't know
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a whole, political party's platform.
Yeah.
Well, I remember being in high school and being that age. And I don't know if you guys ever did like ding dong ditching or like, light a bag of poop on fire so they have to like stomp it out. Yeah, I definitely got caught up in that. You think you're just being funny and it makes them angry and you get a rise out of somebody.
Yeah.
So I guess I get to some degree, like when you're going through that stage of life, getting a rise out of somebody makes you feel powerful and makes you feel in control of sort of like the older people who are controlling you and telling you what to do all the time. So I think it's just misplaced energy at that age, especially.
Yeah.
But it seems like some people don't grow out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like those prank YouTube channels where like it's not really a
Yeah.
prank. It's actually like harmful or like pretty
Yeah.
serious. And then it's like, it's just a prank. What are you so upset about? But really they're
Yeah.
just in it for that reaction, that like angry reaction from or emotional reaction from the other person is what's like driving the motivation.
When we're talking about anger, the other thing that's coming to mind is I remember trying to like fight my brother. I was I think 10 or something at the time. My brother was already huge and playing football and stuff. So I remember he like made me so angry. I can't remember what it was, and I just was like going as fast as I could, as hard as I could to try and like hurt him or like, just get my anger out. And like it amounted to basically nothing because he was just like kind of dodging me or pushing me away or whatever. And I've been curious about, exploring that in therapy and like that drive of pursuing something and maybe just being like, it's not worth it because I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to do anything about it. So I don't know how that ties into anger necessarily, but that wasn't a full-fledged thought.
Uh, oh, Blair, you're awesome.
I'll cut that out.
Oh, that's cool.
What's been really interesting during this recording is like we probably laughed the most during this recording more than other episodes. And it's just interesting that we're laughing the most about our like angry episodes.
Mm.
Why is that? Like, is there some realization after the fact of like how ridiculous the behavior was, or is it just it's just all funny in hindsight? You
Yeah,
know, I wonder what the connection is.
it's got to be that. Like, we're
Yeah, for
probably just
sure.
figuring out like, or looking back on it, it's so hard to be like, oh yeah, that was a accurate way of expressing my emotions, or that was a good way of letting it all out.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens very
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. I think in the therapy context, one thing I've thought about is like, should therapy be, I don't know if you guys watched the show Shrinking. Jimmy takes his client to a boxing ring because he has anger issues. And it's like, should that be a real thing? Should we like have these sessions? Should I have a punching bag in the room so that when I do a session and I'm wanting to work through anger, I can actually have a physical outlet? Like I feel like we've talked about this in a previous episode, but like having a rage room ready, like
Mhm.
when you need it, like
Mhm.
would just be such an awesome thing. Wondering what you guys think about that.
Well, I think you're onto something there because it's a healthy way of working through that. And I guess
Yeah.
why we're laughing about our like angry experiences where we punched beds and walls and you know, broken video game controllers and things like that. When you look back on it, you're like, yeah, that was the worst possible way I could have handled
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
situation. If there's a healthier way to still express that same anger, but you're hitting a punching bag, then it probably wouldn't be so bad looking back on it. You'd be like, well, that was, yeah, I was just getting out some anger and processing, getting out the adrenaline, getting out that, like my experience
Mm-hmm.
when I was just like sprinted home,
Yeah.
so that you can return to your rational state where
Mm.
then you can say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, how can I look at that situation that made me so angry from a more logical, rational perspective and handle it better?
Yeah, from a neuroscience perspective too, it's like when your autonomic nervous system is like elevated and you I feel like that an expression like you were talking about, like punching a punching bag or, hitting a pillow or whatever the case may be, I feel like that allows your system to kind of bring it back down, hopefully, I think, to a normal level, and then you can kind of start accessing like, okay, so what was it that I was really feeling frustrated, embarrassed about?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we should look at it in the same way as sadness. We cry for a reason. It's a reaction, and it allows
Mm-hmm.
us to process through an emotion so that when we're on the other side of it, then we have a more relaxed or logical or rational perspective on it. Obviously, it's a natural reaction. Just because of the state of what anger is, it can come out in a variety of different ways that aren't just as
Yeah.
straightforward as crying.
Yeah.
That anger can represent itself and manifest in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, totally. I see it in my toddler whenever there's a moment that there's some sort of injustice or control put on them in a way that they don't want. Ava will come out and like want to punch. Oftentimes it's at one of us as parents, and it's a natural response that's happening. And for Lauren and I, we try and like get Ava to channel it. We're like, it's totally okay to feel the way you feel. Let's go punch the couch. So we're trying to do that as parents. The other topic that I think we haven't touched on in the anger episode is where anger goes when it's really unhealthy and when it's bottled up in ways is in what we see in a lot of men is like violence
Mhm.
and violence towards women and violence towards humanity. Maybe that's a whole other topic for another episode. There's so much we could talk about there, but it's like all the things we see on the news, it's usually happens because of men who are angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there probably is a whole other episode's worth of stuff to get into
Mm-hmm.
there. That's why we're talking about it today. It's like because so many men don't have either any understanding of their anger and how to express it, or they just don't care to work on it. Then when those angry outbursts happen and those boiling over moments happen, then it can result in like some pretty sad situations for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's why it's an ongoing discussion and clearly a cultural issue that so many men struggle with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jamie, I'm
Yeah.
curious what you have. God, I mean, I would love to know what you have, what work you've done in therapy with anger specifically, if you'd be willing to share.
I've had one session in particular that I can remember where I was aware that I wanted to work on anger because I had some like outburst, I think probably with Lauren or something like that. I would like to do it more, to be honest, but I was like, I want to show this part in therapy. And Ilya is all for like emotional expression in therapy. And I was like, I kind of want to show this part because it feels so out of control sometimes. And so I was trying to do it in therapy, and I was like trying to express, I was like embarrassed about it, but I was like wanting to hit the wall and see if I can get that energy to come out. And so I've done stuff like that where being able to show these angry parts of yourself a little bit more helps diffuse it a little bit. But mostly the thing that I've done that feels like it's actually gotten my anger under control, it really falls under the no more Mr. Nice Guy stuff, where it's like you're starting to recognize what you actually want and what you actually need and express that rather than acting like I don't have needs and I don't have wants. And so that actually, I think, has changed my anger output more than anything, is learning to express what I want and what I need. Because really what ends up manifesting in anger is I feel like I don't have any control over the situation. I'm not getting anything that I want, and I'm just giving, giving, giving. And then I just get really upset. That's sort of been a pattern.
For sure.
I think being able to talk about that in talk therapy has also just been helpful
Mm-hmm.
so that I get a better understanding of what I want.
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Like recognizing the patterns that make you angry, because sometimes we may not initially know what those are, and we just feel ourselves getting angry and not actually thinking about what's causing it. And to your point, like recognizing, oh, I feel like I'm just always going with the flow or in control of the situation. That's leading to angry episodes or leading me to feel angry, which I then suppress. So
Yeah.
rather than having to go to the point, well, now I'm angry and I need a healthy outlet for it, going one step before that and saying what caused that angry episode or those angry feelings in the first place. It was a lack of
Yeah.
feeling control. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe I
Yeah.
need to now set a boundary or let somebody know how I'm feeling about these certain situations and feel like I can get some of that feeling of control back so that the anger doesn't
Yeah.
come in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. I think this work of like self-awareness and just being more in touch with your emotions, I think that's why it's so important, is then we become able to communicate and express what we need in moments where it's difficult. And I think so many of us just go through life numb to that reality and don't change and don't work to understand ourselves. And so we need a lot more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that I'm thinking about, and I don't know, it's again not a fully fledged idea, so I'm gonna pull that in and see what we can get from it. But the role of alcohol in anger. Like I feel like I have been able to, I don't drink much anymore. I just don't like drinking. Definitely don't like getting
Yeah.
drunk. But I've been able to access anger so much more with alcohol in my system. And I think that's been another reason anger's been scary, and then alcohol as a result as well. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have experiences with like alcohol being a contributing factor towards anger or.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think they're linked in the sense that like alcohol kind of lowers your inhibitions and like you don't care as much about looking stupid or saying something that you might normally say when you're sober. And anger is very much the same way, where it's like you get so angry that you don't care what you say, you don't care what you break, you don't care. And so the combination of the two just makes it you even less uninhibited, inhibited. You know what I'm trying to say? To those things that you're going to later regret or say things that you're going to later regret.
Maybe that's how it felt connected. It's like if we're, Jamie, with what you were bringing in with like our goal with this podcast and just having more conversations like this in general is to better understand what it is that you're feeling. If you haven't been paying any attention to how you're feeling and you've been like feeling this rage bubble up inside, but you've been pushing it down, and then you drink alcohol, I feel like maybe that then the inhibitions are gone, and the thing you've been pushing down is finally able to come back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Yeah, when the times I've gotten drunk, I think it depends on the person. Like, I think, like you talk about people who are like happy drunks or
Mm.
angry drunks. And I think that it's like, I think I tend to be a little bit more of a happy drunk. And I don't drink that much either. But when I do, it's like, I haven't noticed that anger come to the surface for me. And so I think for some people, it tends to come out more and they become mean or
But is that
angry. And,
because you've done the
um,
work
is it,
and on knowing what it is that you're feeling and not necessarily having it all come out in anger
no.
with alcohol?
I don't think so. Like, I think that alcohol is its own, like, I think of it kind of like any drug. Like, it's its own drug where it's not, I don't even know that who you are on alcohol is actually who you, like, always buried underneath. I think that who you are on alcohol is a different
Mm.
version of you sometimes. Like, as far back as I can remember, even before I had anger slightly under control, it was never a problem for me to drink and then have that anger come out. It was always, I'm a little bit more goofy and I guess uninhibited in the way of like I care less about what people think and I'm less self-conscious, but
Mm.
the anger didn't pop up.
Yeah.
I kind of want to know if you feel, Blair, like your experiences of that. Does it feel like yourself in those angry moments?
I feel like it's a different version of me when I have been drunk in the past. I literally haven't been drunk in like
Mm-hmm.
a long time. But yeah, I think it is a different version
Mm-hmm.
of me. And I didn't really like that version of me, but it felt like that version of me was angry. And I think that there is something to that. I think there's something to like, okay, there's a version of again, that's maybe why I brought it in was like, if you are doing the work and figuring out what it is that you need and speaking to that and understanding what you're feeling and speaking to that, then I think that you can, when you imbibe alcohol, it's not going to just come out randomly.
Yeah, I'm thinking about your moments, Blair, where you're like, uh, drop a chord and you just get angry. Like I want to know for me as a therapist and also just as a human, like I want to know what it is that will get you to be able to like have that moment and recognize what the anger is really about. Because I don't think it's about the
Mm.
chord. I think it's about something else. And
Yeah.
like that to me is the most fast. Like how can we understand
I
truly what this
I've
shit
done
is about?
some
And
thinking about the things that make me the angriest, and one of the things that always pops into my head is like when I feel as if I don't know something, or if like a feeling of like uselessness. Like if I feel useless, I just get so frustrated because I'm like,
mm,
what am I even doing? Like, who am I? Like it becomes like a whole identity crisis essentially. But if I don't feel like I have
yeah.
utility in like the world, or purpose, that's where it starts to I get really angry.
Yeah, Blair,
Mm,
I do recall some experiences where you were like trying something new for the first time, whether it was like playing a new video game, let's just say, as an example, like immediately getting frustrated with it. And it's like, dude, you just
Yeah.
started. Like, it's fine. Everyone has like that learning experience, but it makes sense now hearing like maybe that's what's kind of triggering the anger response from you is like this feeling of helplessness or not contributing or not being effective. But that was one of those things where I'd be like, it's okay, you're a beginner to this. Like,
hmm. And to be told it's okay when you're angry and it doesn't feel
yeah,
okay, it
Yeah.
also
just
triggers more anger.
just calm down. Just calm down.
Just
Oh my gosh. I gotta figure, yeah, I gotta, when it comes
chill
to the
out, bro.
competitive things, that's for sure. And I'm going golfing right after this with with my partner's parents.
Golf.
So
I fucking hate golf.
I gotta get this anger under control.
It makes me so angry. I don't know. Golf's a good one to express some anger.
Ooh,
Slamming that club into the
no.
ground when you slice the ball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, breaking your club.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Throwing them into the lake.
I Part of me kind of Blair kind of wants to go into like what that feeling of uselessness stems from with you, just as like a
We
live
will at some
experiment.
point.
But also, we don't have to do that.
Yeah, no, it's uselessness. And then I think the other thing that was like,
Yeah.
if I'm made to feel, if I look stupid, that maybe is a whole
Hmm.
25 minutes. We could talk
Yeah,
about that. But
I relate to that one big time. I hate looking stupid. It happened on this podcast a couple times. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's the embarrassment thing again, like looking
Yeah.
stupid, looking embarrassed
for
or
sure.
being embarrassed. Yeah. I think just having these conversations and getting it out in the open. I mean, sometimes these moments are like things that because they can result in something embarrassing happening, a lot of people then bury the experience of being angry and don't talk about what they did when they were angry. And I think just like
Yeah.
hopefully normalizing this, like, you know what, that was a stupid
Yeah.
thing I did when I was angry, and recognizing that and like just getting it out in the open, I think is a part of what can be very helpful in recognizing what causes anger and how to work through it.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
probably a good spot to end it.
Well, one thing that we want to start asking people to do, if you haven't done so, is to subscribe to our channel. Or we gotta ask people. You know,
We gotta promote ourselves a
We're
little
building a community, and we want you guys to know when episodes come out, and yeah, stay engaged
sure.
with the podcast.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's gonna call it. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.